Hello everyone, this is Harshit Raja and I am the 69th Grandmaster from India. And in this video course, I am going to show you how to play with 1e4 and how to play against most of the common replies that black has. So, after 1e4, the most common move for black is going to be e4, e5. And here I cover knight to f3. Of course, black has a few ways to defend against it. Knight f6 is an option which is not defending the pawn, but very common reply to counteract the attack on e5 pawn by attacking the e4 pawn. And here, rather than capturing with knight takes e5, I'm going to recommend this move pawn to d4, throwing off your opponent slightly. And if he takes e takes d4, then after e5, white gets a very quick development and has a pleasant position. And if he takes knight takes e4, then we are going to go for bishop to d3. And after d5, we are going to capture knight takes e5. And in the video, you will see more in detail about how white can continue playing this position and try to play for an advantage. So instead of knight f6, black can even go for d6, which is the Philidor defense. And here white can take advantage of black being a little passive and blocking his bishop on f8 by going d4. And after e takes d4, knight takes d4, white has control over the center and this position after white going knight c3 and usually trying to go for bishop f4, queen d2. And I explain in more detail how white can continue building on this advantage of center. And finally, of course, knight to c6, one of the most common moves that happens in chess. And here, instead of going for the usual Spanish defense with bishop b5 or d4 scotch, I'm going to go for the trendy bishop to c4 move. And this position, I think, is a great position to study for all club players because it's not a lot about theory, but more about plans and ideas. And I show the main plans and ideas that that white can play, starting with d3, potentially bringing the knight from b1 to g3, or going a4 at the right time, trying to gain some space. And I think that this course that I have in Italian should give you a very good understanding of the positional strategical ideas that white can play to get an advantage. Moving on from e5 to c5, the second most popular move, or one can even argue the most popular move. Rather than going for the main lines with knight f3, here I'm going to recommend a very novel idea starting with bishop to e2. And you already bring all the theoretical battles down the drain because now you're bringing your opponent to your own territory where your idea is simple. You want to go d3, f4, knight f3, and I'm not going to show all the plans and ideas for white, but white has a very simple idea to play against the Sicilian, starting with bishop e2. And after looking at my in-depth explanation, I think you are going to be having a very good time against Sicilian players. After c5, black also has the option of course, going for c6, which is super popular, the Caro-Kann. And again, rather than going for d4, I'm going to recommend knight to f3 because I'm focusing on finding positions which give white an easy play. It's super important that in openings, you have a clear strategy or plan in your mind. And I think with knight f3, d5, knight c3, white is going to be able to achieve that position. If d takes e4, we are going to capture knight takes e4. And after knight f6, we are going to go for this very cool queen e2 idea. So I think that it can be very interesting for someone who is struggling to play against Caro-Kann to go for this two knights idea. And if they go for bishop g4, then we are going to go for h3 because after bishop f3, queen f3, we have a bishop pair advantage. And I show how this can be useful as a long-term advantage. So after Caro-Kann comes, of course, the French opening, which many players have been using as a surprise weapon with black. And here I'm going to go old schooled, going for the Tarash after d4, d5, knight to d2. I've been playing this since I was a kid as a club player, and I still play it now as a grandmaster. It also very positional line because after pawn to c5, we are going to capture e takes d5. and after e takes d5, the position that's going to arise after we taking on c5 at some point in the isolated pawn. I'm going to explain some very important exchanges that white should keep in mind. I'll give you a sneak peek that white should love to exchange the dark squared bishops, because after that we are going to get control of the very, very important d4 square. So I explain the main ideas in that. And after knight f6, which is the classical old main line, how white can play starting with e5, bishop d3, c3, and trying to keep control of the central pawns on c3, d4, and e5. So that's French. And after French, of course, comes some of the rarer lines, which, for example, at club level is very popular, but at the top level, not so much. e4, d5, the Scandinavian. And I always think that developing your queen early in the opening is not a good idea, and I explain just why in the video course. After e d5, queen d5, knight c3, we are developing our knight with a tempo. The queen has to move again, and let's say after a move like queen a5, I show how you can go d4, develop all your pieces, and put pressure on the bishop on c8 whenever it comes out on g4 or f5. So that's going to be my recommendation for e5. And after knight f6, rather than defending the pawn with c4 and going for those complications, I'm just simply going to recommend d4. Play simple chess and try to get an easy advantage. And after knight d5, just develop your piece, knight f3, bishop e2, castles, and at some point go for c4. After Scandinavian comes some of the options like e4, b6, where your opponent feels a little funky and tries to surprise you. But now we just get very, very good center, and I think that we should be very happy when our opponent plays b6, because in openings, both sides should usually fight for the center, because having control of the center gives your pieces a lot more ease to develop. And after bishop b7, bishop d3, I explain why f5, the move which seems tempting, is a very bad idea, because after ef5, bishop takes g2, queen h5 check, and after g6, f takes g6. Some crazy complications arising very, very early in the sixth move itself, but white is winning in this ensuing position, and I explain exactly how in the course. And if black goes for e6 and just tries to develop naturally, then I recommend the idea of going knight c3, just trying to keep control of the central pawns, and I think this should give white a good advantage. Black can even go for e4, knight f6, I think the Caro-Kann defense. And here after e5, knight d5, d4, d6, rather than going for c4, I'm going to again simply recommend knight to f3. And if black takes d takes e5, knight takes e5. And how it's important that whenever black goes knight d7, rather than taking on d7, we should come back knight to f3, because both the knights are going to find it difficult to have the right square for them, and then white always has the option to kick the knight on d5 with c4. One last thing that I cover in depth in this video course is e4, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, e5. And now most of the players always play knight f3 and try to go into those kind of positions. But I recommend the queen trade, go into the endgame, because endgames are not really studied that well by club players. So d takes e5, and after d takes e5, going into this endgame after queen d8, king d8, bishop c4. And explain why this endgame can be very difficult for black to play with. I also mention some of the important games that I have played myself in the video course. So this is a small overview of whatever you're going to get in the course. I hope you guys are looking forward to it and learn something to start playing with 1e4. That's it for now. See you in the course.